Hello, families, and welcome to our Autism Exploration Series. I'm Emily Hanson, a Regional Director here at Rural Beginnings. Rural Beginnings' mission is to change lives for our clients, our families, and our professionals, and we do that through our Pledge of Care. Our promise to you is to provide effective treatment through compassionate care. We also strive to achieve our mission through our core values, and one of our core values is education. So teaching families valuable ways to work with your child, and that's why we decided to start these series. Additionally, you'll see the seals of Behavior Health Center of Excellence and the seal from the Autism Commission on Quality. These seals represent the hard work and focus that we place to ensure that VB is providing quality care through the highest standards. Next slide, please. I also wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to the services that we offer here at Rural Beginnings. In addition to our in-home and our center-based ABA services, we also offer diagnostic services, feeding therapy, and social skills programming. So we encourage you to participate with us today throughout the presentation by using the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the screen. We also offer closed captioning during this recording, which you can access by navigating to the bottom of your Zoom screen. Click the closed captioning button on the bottom of the screen. And then without further ado, I'd like you to turn your attention to our presenter of the evening, Jessica Wilson. And then if you want to unmute Jessica so we can hear you.
That would be a great idea. All right, hi everyone, and thank you so much for being here. If you are in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, you may be experiencing a monsoon outside, so I really appreciate you being here. I know that 5 to 6 p.m. is like crazy parenting time, lots of sports and errands to run, so I do really appreciate you being here, and everyone who is taking the time to watch the recording. Thank you for your participation. So just a little bit about me before we get started. So I am a board certified behavior analyst. I also have sought certification for mindfulness, social emotional learning, facilitation, and yoga teacher training. And I'm a certified early childhood educator. I do have experience working in homes, clinics, social skills groups, the school systems, and working with parents and children really of all ages and developmental disabilities. So something that has turned into quite a passion of mine over the last couple of years is bringing trauma-informed care to families, and I've taken quite a bit of continued education in acceptance and commitment therapy, crisis interventions as well. And then, of course, the mindfulness side of things, which is something that we'll be really focused on today. As we go through, if any questions or anything come up, please feel free to reach me at my email, jessica@wellnessbehaviorcoach.com. And then as we are going through the presentation, I'd love to hear from you in the chat as well. Feel free to participate as much or as little as you feel comfortable. I know you might be juggling things right now, so I just appreciate your attention this evening. Okay, so this evening we'll start with just a brief overview of adverse childhood experiences and trauma, and then the buffers and the barriers related to preventing against the long-term impacts of adverse childhood experiences or trauma. And then we'll dive into some mindfulness strategies and practice them together. I will model them, and you can feel free to join me or just watch. And there will be participation opportunities in the chat throughout. I do really want you guys to be able to walk away with something that you can use in your daily life to support yourself and your children. So as we get into a topic that can be uncomfortable at times to learn about, I do invite you to meet me in the stretch zone of learning. So Usually we hang out in our green comfort zone. So this is when we're just kind of going through the motions. We are feel safe and secure. We avoid discomfort. It feels really good in our comfort zones. But where the learning really happens, where the growth really happens, is in our stretch zone. And that's when we're kind of exploring the unknown, trying something new, being open to new practices, new ideas that may be presented to us. But if at any point you're feeling like the information that I'm presenting or the practices that I'm sharing are pushing you more into a panic zone where you're feeling really overwhelmed and unavailable for learning, please feel free to do what you need to do to return to your comfort zone. I totally respect wherever you are today. I would really love to meet you in the stretch zone. I know this is a stretch zone moment for me to be presenting to all of you today. So I appreciate you all being here. So going over some of the adverse childhood experiences and how that relates to trauma. So this, I think oftentimes trauma has become a little bit of a buzzword or maybe overused, or there's some ambiguity around it, or some misconceptions. And I think oftentimes when we think of trauma, we think of um, veterans or people who have experienced combat. And what the research shows is that really adverse childhood experiences or experiences as an adult can have long-lasting impacts on the brain and the body and how we function. And we really are wired for survival, so we're going to do what we need to survive really difficult situations. But from a behavioral perspective, looking at trauma in that lens, it's this adverse learning experience where either somebody's biologically and socially important needs were either unmet, ignored, violated, or neglected. And there can be a lot of unintentional harm that is inflicted on people. And there's a lot of intentional harm as well. And so I do want to acknowledge that as well. And um, the reason that I got so into this topic, learning about trauma in this field, is that individuals that are diagnosed with autism or autistic individuals are at a greater likelihood of experiencing trauma in childhood and throughout the lifetime. And so as behavior analysts, it's really important for us to be mindful and cognizant of that. And then also on the flip side of that, being a parent of a child that has a developmental disability comes with additional stress and can have impacts on the relationship of the parents and then just the overall well-being of the parents involved as well. And so it can have these really detrimental impacts throughout the lifetime, leading to heart disease, autoimmune disease, higher number of infections, dental problems, asthma, sleep disturbances, chronic pain, and gynecological disorders. These are really just to name a few of the long-term impacts of trauma. It really, when you look at the brain scans of people who have experienced trauma in childhood versus people who haven't, you can see the difference. It's very clear how it impacts the brain and how that can be detrimental to the whole overall wellness of the individual who has experienced it. With that said, the medical research has shown that the impact of the trauma or the adverse childhood experiences that people have, the outcomes can be directly related to how the environment is set up for them after that trauma. And this is what we think of as buffers, or really these things that can prevent the long-lasting impacts of trauma, and just boost up the supports in the person's environment. If you're familiar with the behavior analysis side of things, when we're looking at maybe a behavior intervention plan, these are things that we might throw into the antecedent strategies. How are we preventing the effects of trauma, stressful experiences for children, and just boosting up their wellness. So we'll go into a few of these and then really focus on one in particular. So like I said, a traumatic event it can be traumatic for one person and not for the other, or it can impact everyone in different ways. So I really want to bring light to the fact that that might not sound traumatic to somebody, or wow, that's obviously traumatic to somebody. That is the subjective idea. It's really, how did that person process the trauma? Did they have the resources and the skills and the tools to move through that in a way that they were able to move past it? One of the number one buffers, I would say the number one buffer here, is the healthy relationships that the individual has in the environment. And that's really where our relational strategies, when we're engaging with children, when we're modeling compassion and we are meeting them where they are, those healthy relationships are the ones that can really have that buffer, like a blanket of protection for the long-lasting impacts of trauma. And oftentimes kids who have experienced trauma in childhood, oftentimes they remember the people who were in their life, who let them know that adults are safe, or that people are safe, and that they can connect. And so those relationships can have such a profound impact on children. And I think that the strategies that we're going to practice today can really boost up your ability to engage in those healthy child interactions with your child. Regular exercise, of course. So the person has regular access to physical activity and movement. They're getting into their body. We'll talk a little bit about mindful movement, in particular mindfulness. So the person has the skills to use stress relieving techniques. Are they able to cope? Do they have somebody to co-regulate with them, or do they have somebody who's modeling these strategies for them? And are they practicing them? Are they in the process of learning them? These are all really important to consider. Looking at mental health care, of course, looking at access to resources within their environment, counseling, play therapy, therapy that will use that trauma-informed perspective and support them in their well-being. And that's where I really encourage us as behavior analysts to make sure that the healthcare that we're providing is, of course, trauma-informed. Sufficient sleep, which I know we all get that every night. I think that this is one of those underrated buffers that we sometimes neglect, and truly having good sleep routines for yourself and for your child can have such a profound impact. And the research really shows how much our brain heals overnight and how much we are better equipped throughout the day when we have a good night's rest. And so sleep being such a strong impact on our overall well-being, it can serve as a really strong buffer for the impacts of trauma in the lifetime. Then, of course, proper nutrition, having access to a nutritious diet, encouraging those things. I want to acknowledge too that in the autism world, there is quite a bit of selective eating. There's lots of difficulties around that. And so it's a lot easier said than done. So I want to acknowledge that just being here right now, learning about some strategies today. We're really going to focus on mindfulness, and I hope that you can come away with a couple of strategies. These are, the basics of overall well-being and wellness, and it's just let's just pick one thing today to focus on one, because that's a lot, right? So I also want to acknowledge, what are the barriers that get in the way of the buffers? Like everyone kind of knows, the pillars of wellness, like get proper exercise, nutrition, sleep, rest. But what are the barriers, right? Like it's we're doing our best here, but it's not always that easy. We know what we should do, or we know, what would help in that moment, but we're just not able to, or we don't have the internal resources quite yet, or there are other barriers. So we'll talk about those. So there may be just behavioral difficulties within the environment that the youth parents are grappling with, or your own behavioral struggles, and that can really just impede the access that you have to those buffers, or how beneficial those buffers can be. The access and availability of the buffers, the access to nutritious food, or there may not be a stable living environment for you to sleep soundly every night, right? Like it's that would be nice if that was available to everyone, but it's just not. Um, and there might be cultural and individual reasons. I know culturally, seeking mental health care in certain cultures is just not really a thing, and it might be frowned upon or shamed. And so I want to, bring attention to that, and hold space for that fact that um, being here and learning about this can sometimes just be going against your cultural norm. So that's really amazing that you're taking that moment for yourself too. Readiness. Sometimes we are just not ready. Sometimes we're just planting the seeds. And, if today you're feeling ready to practice some of these strategies, I'm so excited. If I'm just planting seeds and then later on you come back and watch this, or you go through the slides again, and a couple of years from now, you just save it on your drive, that's totally fine with me. Sometimes we're just not ready for new information, or we're not ready to really dive in here to these practices. So I'm acknowledging that as well. And then the information, especially around trauma-informed care, around healthy nutrition and exercise, there are hundreds and billions of dollars that are put into these industries that make it really confusing to piece through and to find what makes the most sense for you and your family. And I want to acknowledge how unbelievably overwhelming it can be with all of the information that is out there. It is so readily and easily accessible. Sometimes it can be very overwhelming. And then sometimes it's just the lack of education around these strategies, these buffers. Some people just don't know until they know. I believe that we do the best that we can with the skills that we have at the time, and that's the best work that we've got. And until we know better, we can't really do better. And then the resources, either internally, externally, having the financial means to take care of these things, to access mental health care, to access support within the community, that can become a barrier as well. Having the prerequisite skills as well, and the support within your environment. Maybe you're the one person in your household who's like, hey, let's go practice these breathing strategies. I'm so excited about them. And then like everyone else doesn't really care for it, right? It can be really hard to to decide to do those things when it's against the norm, whether it's in your culture or your family. And so building a support system of people who maybe have the same interests or have the same goals and that are aligned with that can be really helpful. And that's really where a lot of that healing and those buffers come into place when we have access to community resources. And I do want to just shout out Verbal Beginnings here because they've taken care of a couple of these barriers here. So, offering a free parent webinar on these strategies and these practices for supporting parents gets rid of a couple of these barriers, right? You're here, it's available, and it's free. And I'm so happy that you took advantage of it and that you're here to learn with me. So I'm curious if you all are willing to just pop in the chat what comes to mind when you hear the word mindfulness. And just like one word that comes to mind when you think of that, of mindfulness. The chat is disabled. Okay. Oh.
Please use the question and answer feature to add your thoughts.
Yeah. Oops. Okay. Yeah. If you can type in the Q&A. There we go. So um, relaxation, uh, strategic, breathing. Great. Yeah. Any other words that come to mind when you think of mindfulness? No pun intended. Meditation, aware, yoga, stretching. Hi, Christy. Um, setting intentions. Thanks for all the answers, everyone. Awareness. Wonderful. I really appreciate the participation. All right. So yeah, so mindfulness can mean a lot of different things to people. I think it oftentimes when I hear of mindfulness, like in the past, I kind of thought that it was just meditation, which can be a hard practice. It can be really hard to slow down and get in tune with our thoughts, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So sometimes meditation and mindfulness become lumped together. Um, but to me, being mindful means that we're just noticing the world around us, we're noticing the world inside us. And so that means we're becoming aware of the present moment, our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our five senses. And by doing so, by becoming more mindful and by slowing down, by pausing, we're able to notice what's going on around us. And when we can notice, that's where that choice comes in. So instead of just reacting to situations, we're able to more mindfully respond and behave in a way that's more in line with our values. I really like this definition of mindfulness by Sylvia Boorstein. So, mindfulness is the aware, balanced acceptance of the present experience. It isn't more complicated than that. It is opening to or receiving the present moment, pleasant or unpleasant, just as it is, without either clinging to it or rejecting it. So, we're noticing the present moment, we're noticing what's going on inside us, around us, and then we're just saying, that's what it is. That is what it is. It's raining. It is pouring right now. And is what it is. There's not much I can do about that. There's nothing I can do about that. It's that just noticing things just as they are rather than putting our expectations or trying to change things that are really out of our control. And so when we think of mindfulness, oftentimes we are mindful, like we are busy busy people. We are in a world that's very fast paced oftentimes and doesn't make it easy to slow down and to be mindful and present and tune into ourselves. And so I do want to acknowledge that, oftentimes parents are juggling eight different things at once, maybe 800. Like, the different streams of thought, thinking about, the appointment that you have to schedule or the prescription that needs to be picked up or, this 5 to 7 witching hour of parenting, I feel like is a common experience where people are running around, like trying to get dinner on the table, the dog's barking, kids are crying, kids are asking you for food, everyone wants a piece of you, and you're like just trying to survive that time of day, right? So it does make it pretty hard to slow down and connect. And so I do want to acknowledge that this isn't really like uh the norm. Like, we're not really usually taught to be mindful. Like, I think that we are you know often so busy because of the culture that we live in and the way that we are raised. But I think that you're just taking this time for yourself, even if you're just listening, tuning in. This is a great way, a great start if you don't already have some mindful practices that you're using. Um, and so when I think of here, I really like this visual of the brain, the breath, and the body, and how disconnected we can become when we are so busy, when we're distracted, when there's lots going on in the environment. Um, you know, sometimes we are full of thoughts, thinking through, different outcomes, worrying about something that's already happened, something that might not even happen. And then what happens with our breath? We are very disconnected from it. Our body just kind of goes into its automatic processes. Our body's wired for survival. It'll keep us breathing, but it's not going to keep us breathing in a way that is going to relieve stress. It's just going to usually keep our breath up here in our chest and that shallow kind of the chest breathing. And it'll keep us in that state so that we can attend to all of the different things that are going on in our environment. And so when we are so disconnected from our breath, um, then we are also disconnected from our body, and we are maybe feeling super tense. Maybe we're not even really noticing until later, and you sit down and you're like, oh my gosh, my body just feels terrible right now. I'm in lots of pain, or I feel so fatigued. But we are just oftentimes on that go, go, go. Um, and so these strategies that we're going to practice, I hope will help for you to have that connection between your brain um, and through these mindfulness strategies and connecting to your body. Because when we are really connected to and more in that regulated state, we're just better. We're better able to respond to people in a way that we feel good about, that we can walk away saying, I did my best there. And otherwise, when we're here, we're often very reactive and we are in that state of fight or flight response. We're oftentimes just very stressed and doing the easiest thing. We might not take that extra moment to check in with our child or our spouse to see how they're doing. We're just surviving, and that's okay. And I want to just acknowledge that that's unfortunately pretty normal for us. And so I think that there's no shame in if that's where you're at. That's where a lot of people are at. But taking a moment to engage in a mindfulness strategy can really just kind of regulate your body, get yourself back online, I like to say, so that you can see what are your choices here. How can you respond in a way that's more in alignment with your values rather than just being more reactive. And so when we are able to do that, when we're able to build in those mindfulness practices, and we're a little bit more regulated, the idea really isn't that we're getting rid of all of that chaos going on around us. The dog's still going to bark, the kids are still going to need food, and people are still going to be um, emailing you, and there's going to still be that stress in your life. Like it doesn't just go away. It's just so that you can find a space within yourself that you're able to just observe it and say, this is what it is, and this is how I'm going to respond, rather than just that go, 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 going through the motions type of reacting rather than responding. So we're going to practice some of these strategies together. I do want to share a story before we get started to kind of demonstrate the importance of using these strategies and how they can influence your children as well when you practice them. So, as an early educator, I was working with a 20-month-old child and coaching the parent on using some strategies for supporting her overall development. And then she also had a 4-year-old sister, which she was a great peer model. So we incorporated her into session a lot. And I asked her, hey, would you like to practice some butterfly breaths? And you just sit on the floor and pretend you're a butterfly and take some deep breaths. And it's super fun if you're 4. I think it's fun as well as not a 4-year-old. And I did it with her and the mother, and we were just kind of practicing it and modeling it and not really expecting that the 20-month-old was going to come over and sit with us and start taking deep breaths with us. She put her hand on her belly, one hand on her heart, and she started trying to like take deep breaths with us. And I just like, that was probably one of the best days of my career. Like I was so excited because I, one, did not expect her to participate or join at all. She was barely really imitating signs at that point, but I really believe that kids want to regulate their bodies. They want to learn these strategies. We just have to model them and then they follow suit. Kids oftentimes like want to behave like their parents. They want to imitate what they're doing. And if we can model some of these strategies for them and just get them interested in it, even just interested, just join in, even if they're just watching, that's amazing. That's a win because these are strategies like we've talked about can have long lasting impacts to buffer against those adverse childhood experiences, trauma, and just the day to day stress of being a human in the world that we live in. And so we're going to practice some of these strategies that really can be used in your daily life or with your children or by yourself. I think that it's great if you're modeling them and then they start to, join in. But really, I emphasize, especially just coming from a trauma-informed perspective, to invite participation. So ask them rather than demand that they join you. This should be an invitational practice. They are not required or expected. We're just inviting them. And if they want to, then they will join us. And maybe we model it and invite them 25 times. And then finally, on that 26th time, they're like, all right, I'm just going to see what this is all about. But in the meantime, you're practicing it for yourself, which is great and is a win in itself. So this is really where I emphasize like taking care of yourself as a parent and taking those mindful moments for yourself, engaging in those practices will impact your child, whether you see it now or you see it in a couple weeks or a couple months or later in their life. Taking care of yourself takes care of them. And I think that that's really un- under discussed, really. We are often so focused on what strategies do we need to support this child? What strategies can we put in place that are supportive for the child's needs? And then sometimes the parents are just surviving, like we talked about with that mindful reacting type of parenting where like you know what your child's BCBA told you how to respond to this behavior, but then in the moment it's like, how am I supposed to do that when I like am barely breathing and surviving? So let's just like acknowledge that it's so important to take care of yourself as the parent. And I know how deeply you care for your children, and that by doing so, that just inevitably will impact your child's well-being. And so we'll first start with some breath awareness activities. So, like I was saying, getting your body back online is just kind of overriding your like natural systems there that are just keeping you in your survival state. You're actually going to be breathing into your belly. Most of the time, we're breathing up here in our chest, and we're not taking those full, deep belly breaths that can actually get your parasympathetic nervous system going, and where you can actually regulate your body and start to calm down. Um, and so we'll practice those together. These are great just to integrate, um, during the day, during times of stress, maybe transitional times as well, like on the way to school, in the car, on the way home from work, before you go to bed. I think the best advice I've heard recently was to integrate these strategies like into existing routines that are already like pretty well established, where you can maybe just throw in that sometimes is a lot easier said than done for kids on the spectrum, but practicing a new routine is going to be harder than just like adding a whole new routine. But sometimes just adding something that is already a strong chain of behavior can sometimes be more effective when we're trying to get these self-care strategies in place. And so I'm going to guide us through 3 collective breaths. It can just be like 3 deep breaths, but when we're thinking of collective breaths, it can be like us as a collective, it can be your family, it can be you and your child, um, or you and your children practicing 3 collective breaths. And like I was saying, like having this embedded throughout the day in those routines can be really helpful, just to slow down and model that type of breathing for our kids. And so, if you feel comfortable, you can just allow your eyes to close, or gently lower your gaze. And then I like to place one hand on my heart, one hand on my belly. And this really helps with that cueing, especially for younger children. Like I was saying, that 20-month-old, she sat down, she put her hand on her heart and her belly, and I was just shocked to see her doing that. So that can just help with the cueing. And even if that's the one step um, that they're able to imitate, that's great. It's part of the breathing, and we can just reinforce those baby steps. And so, even if that's where you're at today, if that's how connecting to your breath feels comfortable to you, that's totally fine too. Um, so we'll do 3 deep breaths in through our nose and out through our mouth. So we'll inhale deeply through your nose, filling your belly. And exhale through your mouth, really just sigh it out. Like give that loud, audible sigh. And then inhaling again through your nose, out through your mouth. And then the last one, try to make this your biggest inhale yet, breathing into your belly and really filling it up. Feel your hand, and how your belly expands when you breathe in through your nose. that's it. Ta-da. That's it. That's all you got to do. And then practice that every day forever. But just starting there with three deep breaths can just really start to impact your body, because your body does want to practice these things. It just doesn't know how yet. And it's so foreign to really take those deep breaths. And so once you start doing it, it'll start to just feel good in your body, and it'll start to become more of that like routine or that norm that this is just what we do. We're on the way to work and we're going to take those three deep breaths. And so I'm curious, to hear from you guys, if you participated, how did it feel to take three breaths and to really focus on breathing into your belly rather than into your chest? Did you notice any sensations in your body, or did that feel new to you? And when might you want to try to incorporate those three deep breaths into your life? And feel free to type that into the chat, into the Q&A, I guess. Oh, I just saw Amber's "I feel seen" with the 5 to 7 witchy hour. Yeah. After getting very little sleep at night. I love that answer, because that is such a reality. Like, not getting enough sleep at night, like we talked about, can really impact um, how you're responding throughout the day. So setting yourself up for success in the morning, saying, gosh, I really didn't sleep well, I got to get into my body and start to take some deep breaths. That's a really great idea. And then first thing in the morning, right before bed, to help get to sleep. um, before I respond to a situation that is upsetting me, absolutely. Feeling calmer and quieter in the mind. That's amazing. Thank you, everyone, for your answers. Helps to feel tensions and to let go. That's wonderful. Yeah, something that I like to do when I'm taking deep breaths is kind of inhale, maybe that intention, like somebody said earlier, intention setting. So maybe you're just inhaling this calm energy, and you're exhaling the tension in your body. So kind of inhaling or bringing in what you're trying to do a little bit more of today, and exhaling what you need to let go of. That can be a really great practice. Yeah, when I get frustrated with my child, absolutely. And getting frustrated with your child is so normal and so much okay. Like, it's okay. And so modeling in that moment, gosh, hey, bud, I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm going to take some deep breaths, because this is what we do when we feel frustrated, right? Because I care about you, I love you, and I want to respond in a way that's in line with my values and shows you that. And so that is a really great way. Um, yeah. These are really great ideas. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I put this in here just for you guys to refer to later. The slide should be sent out to you so that you can just have that typed up for you. Um, and then we will go into those 2-word check-in. So I like the 2-word check-in because it really builds in that mindfulness of your emotions and your internal experiences, and then enhances your emotional awareness, your self-awareness, and can be a really powerful daily practice to incorporate multiple times a day, maybe once a day, but to build in some emotional regulation. Just naming your feelings can validate what it is that's happening in your body, and be be something really powerful in your toolkit, just as a parent, to check in either with yourself, your child, your children, your spouse, maybe a friend, I I really like this one. And so what we'll do is now that we've taken a couple of deep breaths, um, we'll just take in, I'm gonna place one hand on my heart and one hand on my belly and take a nice breath in through the nose. You can just keep taking a couple of deep breaths here, taking a moment for yourself. And as you continue to breathe, just notice how you're feeling and what emotions you're experiencing inside you. Any emotion is welcome. So, give yourself some permission to just feel whatever it is that you're feeling and take a moment to just connect with how you're feeling. And we'll come up with two words that describe those emotions that you're feeling. And so you can take a look at the screen. I like a good visual support here. I'm a behavior analyst, so I've got to have something for you. And oftentimes, like we kind of cycle through our go-to, like feeling happy, sad, relaxed, engaged. Like those are kind of our go-tos. Or maybe you ask your kid how they're doing, and you get maybe a good. Just practicing this two-word check-in with you all. Um, I'm curious to hear from you. What are the two words that come to mind? It doesn't have to be from the visual here. It could just be something that that you came up with. But if you want to type in the Q&A how you're feeling, two words. And I'll just model that I'm feeling pretty content right now and thankful, calm, thankful, and relaxed. Wonderful. And even if you don't share it in the chat, you can just kind of like say it quietly to yourself or internally, or um, modeling that for your children too. Trusting and comfortable, that's amazing from a presenter side. Relaxed, thankful, skeptical, okay, that makes sense. Anyone else want to pop in the chat? A couple of words: tired and hopeful. Thank you, everyone, for your participation here. Optimistic. That's great. Curious, tired, hopeful. That's great. I really appreciate everyone participating and checking in with yourself. This is a really great practice. I think the thing that I like the most about the two-word check-in is that it allows for two things to be true, right? You can feel happy, you can feel tired, you can feel optimistic, you can feel dread. There are no limits to the human experience. So it's okay if you feel multiple things at once. That's totally normal. And I think that helps to normalize for our kids too. And this is where I'll just insert a little story time that modeling this for kids um, can be really helpful. So what I do, what I've done in the past, so my last ABA session with a 6-year-old client, I told him, hey, Bob, let's do a two-word check-in. I'm feeling a little sad and I feel excited because I was feeling sad. It was my last day, but I was feeling excited for him because he had a new BCBA coming in and she was wonderful and it was such a great match. And so I just said that. I'm feeling a little sad and happy or excited. I can't remember which one I said. And he said, I'm feeling happy and teary. So teary meant like teary eyed, like a little sad. And I just, my heart melted and I was like, oh, thanks for sharing that. And, he said, well, today I have two BCAs because we were both there. But I feel a little bit sad. And then a couple minutes later, he started taking deep breaths, just totally unprompted on his own while he was coloring. Started taking some deep breaths. And I said, wow, bud, look at you. And he said, yeah, I'm taking deep breaths to calm my body down and to make me feel happy. And I just like, second best day of my career. Like that was amazing because this is a child who um, is experiencing a lot of stress um, and collective trauma within his house, and he was able to access some of those skills just from modeling. And it took him a few months to really start to like participate in those practices, but once he did, he really liked it. And that just goes to show, like, I really think that kids do want to learn these strategies, but sometimes it's really uncomfortable at first, especially if they're just like, what are you doing? Or they are not participating, or it's like aversive where it's uncomfortable for us, or maybe we're in our stretch zone and we feel uncomfortable doing that. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, if you're practicing these things and maybe you do it once a week or once every 5 weeks, like, you're doing great. And modeling the practices for your kids can really be such a wonderful buffer for them in their life. Okay. And so we will practice one more. So, some of the grounding skills and techniques that I like to use, and I like to use these with kids. I think it's a really great way to build in some of those, like if your child's in ABA, some of those listening and responding skills, some imitation, some identifying objects and colors. Like it's a great learning skill in general, but then also it is getting them grounded and getting yourself grounded and building up your mindfulness skills too. So when we are really stressed, just simply grounding into the world around us, into the present moment by tuning into our five senses can be beneficial for our overall well-being and how we respond in that moment. Because sometimes when we're thinking about all the things that we're juggling and the appointments that we have to book and the prescriptions that we need to pick up and the kids and all of the extracurricular activities and everyone needs a ride somewhere, right? Like it's a lot. But just slowing down, taking a couple of those breaths like we practiced, and then using some of these grounding techniques. So I like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding, and I like rainbow grounding. I think these are like just my go-to ones, and I do these by myself, and I do these with clients and their families and parents. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is just looking at your five senses. So you name five things you can see, four things that you can touch, three things that you can hear, two things you can smell, and one thing you can taste. You could do one of the senses, you could do two of the senses, you could do three of the senses, like it doesn't matter. But just kind of tuning into those five senses can help to calm you down a little bit. And it's not for everyone. Sometimes it can stress somebody out a little bit more to be too much in their into their present their five senses. So that's okay. Going outward and looking around you and looking at finding something that is one of the colors of the rainbow can be really great too. So kind of if you feel like maybe going inwards and focusing on your own senses is too much, then you can also go outwards and look at the world around you, find something that's red, find something that's orange, find something that's yellow. Again, these are great to use with kids. They can be really fun I Spy games. I personally enjoy them. And so we are a little bit short on time, so I'm not going to have everyone do this, but these are going to be in the slides that you can reference later. And then, of course, mindful movement. So sitting for long periods of time can really have adverse effects on our overall well-being. This is a norm now that we just sit for long periods of time throughout the day, and our activity levels have dropped just as a collective. But we can invite some more moments of mindful movement throughout the day. I really enjoy chair yoga in particular because you can do it from your seat, and it's a very accessible practice. So I definitely recommend that. Or just looking into like how can you be a little bit more mindful during the movement that you already engage in. Maybe it's walking the dog or going on a walk with the kids, dancing in your kitchen. Like how can you just kind of notice how that makes your body feel? Do a 2-word check-in with yourself. Like, I felt pretty engaged and relaxed after I did yoga. Noticing how it feels in your body to move mindfully. And so I'm really curious to hear from you all. What are some of the tools that you might be interested in using in your daily life? Are there any that you seem to really like, or that you feel like you took away from? You can just type them in the Q&A. Like I was saying, these are, quick practices that you can do for yourself. You can model them with your kids. You can just practice them maybe with your partner, doing a 2-word check-in, like, hey, let's do a 2-word check-in. How was your day? What's coming up for you? So that you kind of know where they are at. So we're oftentimes just kind of going to our normal kind of go-to responses. So the breathing and the 2-word check-in. Wonderful. 2-word check-in and mindful movement in the morning as part of the bedtime routine and as part of the bedtime routine. Wonderful. I see myself doing chair yoga and incorporating 2-word check-ins. Awesome. Yeah, they're at the end of the presentation, you guys will find there's some resources for like different YouTube channels and stuff too. And we didn't have time today, but maybe if Earl Beginnings invites me back, we can do some more of the more practices. 2-word check-in, and we'll be thinking about adding this during transition times. Yes, it's not something I had mentioned, but that's a great time to do it during transitions, and all of the different transitions that we have during the day for yourself or your kids. Great. I really appreciate everyone's participation and being here today. I hope that you're walking away with some really valuable tools. There's some resources here. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. My email's here. And yeah, thank you, everyone. You're welcome.
Thank you guys for joining today's presentation. Next month, is that on the next slide?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oops. Second.
I know my favorite strategy is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, such a good one.
Yeah, I use it all the time. So I'm excited to continue that. And also next month, if you guys can join us, we're going to be talking about our social beginnings and social skills groups. So that is called Sensational Social Opportunities. We'll also be talking about the summer camp social beginnings program, and that's going to be presented by Justine O'Mara on February 13th at 5 p.m. And again, I really appreciate Jessica's presentation. This was wonderful, and I appreciate everybody's participation. So,
Yeah, and we have one person asking just to go back to the resources. So yeah, definitely can do that. I'll say, like, while a few people are still on here, the Finch self-care app is like my favorite app. It's very kid friendly, but also fun for adults. Like, I know at least 10 adults that I've gotten on this app. And they have the 5 4 3 2 1 breathing in there. They have the grounding, the different breathing strategies, but it's fun. And I think like an ABA creator was behind it, I swear, because it's very reinforcing, super, super fun, and playful, but it's really effective for getting in some of these strategies throughout your day. Yeah. And thank you, Keith, for being here. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. The Balance app. I feel like I've tried a bunch. I will be honest, I've tried like a bunch of different mindfulness apps. I think the Finch one is just like number one for me. Like I keep coming back to it. I've used it for like 2 years in a row. It's a really, really well done app. I couldn't stick with some of the other ones, but I think that there are a lot of really great apps out there. But I'll definitely look out for the Balance app. All right. Any questions? I answered.
I think we got everyone. So thank
All
you so
right.
much for participating in
Yeah,
today's
thank you, everyone.
webinar, and we hope to see you next month. Bye.